We thought that we would invite the 6 former governors of South Carolina to sit down and talk about their time in office and the time they've spent since they've left office. Unfortunately, Senator Fritz Hollings was unable to attend, but 5 of the other former governors did show up at our studios. We sat down and spoke with them and had a wonderful time. We knew exactly that this was the right decision to have as our premier program, to sit down and talk with the men whose job it was to discern what the big picture was for the state of South Carolina. As a matter of fact, watching them arrive and interact before we even had our formal sit down was more than worth the price of admission.
I really don't know a whole lot what we're doing over we're here.
It's simple, really. David Beasley, along with 4 of South Carolina's 5 other former governors, were here to talk about their time in office.
Now we talk about Democrats and Republicans, but not too many years ago it was up country versus low country.
Before that discussion began, however, it was time to catch up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Hi, sir. How are you doing?
Good to see you again. Governor Riley, how are you? Welcome back to ETV. Nice to see you.
And the meetings in the ETV lobby provided an insight into just how close these members of the former Governors Club are.
Oh, how you doing, pal? Nice to see you. How you doing? Better not deserve, old friend.
It wasn't just governors greeting each other.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
Former First Ladies took some time to catch up.
Very good.
And this being a meeting of politicians, the talk, of course, soon turned to politics. Democrats Dick Riley and Jim Hodges shared a quiet moment discussing an upcoming visit of a Democratic presidential hopeful.
The thing for Richardson? Yeah. Okay.
And the conversation turned to the race for the chair of the state's Democratic Party, while over on another side of the room, past jobs were discussed. David Beasley taught at Harvard after he left office.
You come out of a meeting, you come out of a lecture, and then you run into the David Gergens, and then you run into this, and they asking you, why'd you do that, or why'd you do that? And then they start getting really deeper insights about things. And that was a lot of fun.
The fun, to some extent anyway, stopped when the men were asked to move into makeup.
A long time since I've done this.
It's been a long time.
And sitting in the green room, waiting for the taping to begin, the conversation among these most powerful men in South Carolina turned to the very ordinary: sports, health issues, and of course, yes, politics. Eventually, everyone was made up and asked to move on.
I have just found out that there are very few photographs that exist with everyone together.
So the men and their wives did what is expected of all politicians: pose for some pictures.
All the young guys and the young girls are in the back.
We had some comments.
Before they headed into the studio. And a sign of the discussion to come, listen to David Beasley as he talks to Jim Hodges and reminisces about their contentious 1998 campaign.
Every time historically we were on TV together, we were beating each other's head in.
There were no beatings in this get-together, unless, of course, you count the good-natured kidding the men offered each other. Instead, what followed was an interesting, thoughtful discussion of South Carolina's past, present, and future. 40 years ago tomorrow, 28 young men and women were injured. 3 were shot and killed in a civil rights battle that took place right here on the campus of South Carolina State University in Orangeburg. Hello, I'm Andrew Gobiel. Welcome to this very special edition of The Big Picture. We are live in Orangeburg, right on the memorial commemorating the lives of those who lost their lives in this battle and the 28 injured in what has become known as the Orangeburg Massacre. Over the next half an hour, we will speak with the only person who was convicted in connection with that. Now, he wasn't one of the shooters. He was actually a civil rights activist convicted of inciting a riot days before the incident took place. That conviction was later dropped, and he was pardoned by the state of South Carolina. We'll also hear from the historian who coined the phrase Orangeburg Massacre, and we'll speak with the son of America's foremost civil rights advocate who happened to be in South Carolina today. First, however, a look back and later a look forward at what has become known as the Orangeburg Massacre.
We shall overcome.
The anthem of the civil rights era, heard frequently during the protests, marches, And yes, funerals of the 1950s and 60s manifested a hope for those looking to improve the lot of African Americans. As 1968 dawned, those marchers and the rest of the nation faced upheaval both at home and abroad. In January, Vietnam exploded with the Tet Offensive. Troop levels escalated as the North Vietnamese surged south in a surprising, successful attack on American troops. Early evening, April 4th, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed as he stood at a hotel balcony. 2 months later, moments after winning the California presidential primary, Bobby Kennedy was gunned down as he walked through a Los Angeles hotel kitchen. 1968 was indeed a difficult, explosive year in the United States and in South Carolina. Civil rights battles were fought on many fronts: lunch counters, classrooms, buses. This one, in Orangeburg, started at a bowling alley. Students at SC State were forced to travel to Columbia to bowl. They eventually protested at Orangeburg's bowling alley, which then closed and then reopened as a private club, excluding blacks. On February 8th, protesters started a bonfire on campus. Firefighters and law enforcement officials were called in. A law enforcement officer, historians say, fired a warning shot in the air, but the other officers, hearing the gunshot, thought they were under attack and they opened fire. Moments later, 27 students were injured. 3 other students, Samuel Hammond, Delano Middleton, and Henry Smith, were killed. Less than 24 hours later, Governor Robert McNair called it one of the saddest days in the history of South Carolina, but he blamed the violence on, quote, black power advocates. Later investigations into those allegations found them to be untrue. A year later, the federal government tried and then acquitted 9 law enforcement officers who were at the scene. One person was indeed jailed as a result of the killings: Cleveland Sellers, a young student who headed the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison, served 7 months for inciting a riot that took place days before the shootings ever occurred, and was eventually released on good behavior. In 1993, the state pardoned Cleveland Sellers. Now, attempts to reconcile the relationship between blacks and whites have faced various challenges. Even the use of the phrase Orangeburg Massacre rubs some the wrong way, while others ask, how else can one describe the killings of 3 unarmed men? In 2001, Governor Jim Hodges spoke on campus, saying, quote, "We deeply regret what happened here on the night of February 8th. 2 years later, Governor Mark Sanford went a step further, expressing more than mere regret, saying, quote, "I think it's important to tell the African American community in South Carolina we don't just regret what happened in Orangeburg 35 years ago, we apologize for it."
I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Why?
Because I saw a picture of an F-6F or a plane like it on one of the paper magazines climbing. I said, man, that's what I want to do. And the Navy offered me everything I wanted.
Leroy Robinson, Robbie to his friends, got what he wanted. He became a World War II naval aviator, a fighter pilot. On December 7th, 1941, 17-year-old Robbie Robinson was working as a civilian guarding a dam just outside of Columbia.
I made a whole lot of money, 75 cents an hour while I went to school. But I didn't care anything about school then.
The grainy black and white film from the war documents events that took place more than 60 years ago. To Robbie Robinson, it's almost like these events happened yesterday. His flight training in Florida?
That's when they gave me the F-6F. And the instructor, Bayers, I believe was his name, and he'd been shot down in a Wildcat, but he had 11 kills. And he said, if you're going to be a fighter pilot, you're going to have to whip me. So I did.
His next stop? The Pacific, and islands with names that became quite familiar to Americans. Guam, Saipan,
Tinian, Rhoda. We were the fast carrier task force. The Hornet, the Essex, all the big carriers, they split them up into fours, and they roamed the Pacific. And if it hadn't been for carriers, we would have lost the war.
Robbie Robinson, born and raised in Prosperity, South Carolina, was soon flying off the USS Hornet in the Pacific. His first flight was low and slow. He was looking for a downed American pilot looking down over the ocean when he saw a brown plane flash overhead.
The brown airplane had big round meatballs on it.
The Japanese flag.
Japanese fighter pilot. And he was in a zero. So he came, I could see the smoke coming off of his wing as he was firing, and he couldn't hit worth a damn. He was fishtailing. And the fishtail always throws your guns off. An airplane ain't nothing but a gun platform. It's a very maneuverable gun platform. And anyway, he was trying to slow down, I was trying to speed up. I crammed everything forward, wore emergency power, picked my flaps up, closed the canopy, and I was picking up speed to get out of his way. And he came up about 75 feet in front of me. Oh, I had to.
It was the first of his kills.
He went into pieces. He blew up right there. I had to fly through the pieces.
Robbie Robinson shot 5 Japanese aircraft down sooner than any other naval aviator in history. He became the youngest ace in the Navy and felt no remorse whatsoever.
They hated us and we hated them. And they deserved our hate. And they would shoot our parachutists up and we would shoot theirs. I had a piece of silk, I've lost it, that came off a Japanese parachutist that the guy I was flying wing on rammed and brought it home on his belly tank. The silk from the Japanese parachutist. And that's not a story that you like to tell, but it was happening. It did happen. And they'd do the same thing. And you don't blame them, they don't blame us. But you think they didn't want me dead? Hell, I wanted to kill them.
Eventually, he was transferred to San Diego, where he trained a new aircraft, a jet, and readied for the invasion of Japan. That invasion never came.
So the atomic bomb, I was glad they dropped it. Very glad, because I would have been in the front lines, yes.
And he had another reason to be happy the war was over. He met his wife, Angie, in San Diego.
Oh, yeah. She had the brains. Besides that, she was a good woman. Good women are hard to find.
She put up with you.
Damn right.
Like tens of thousands of other veterans at the end of the war, he returned home, went back to school, he has a chemistry degree from USC, and became the greatest generation that helped build a nation. But that's a notion he disagrees with.
We are not the greatest generation. Today's generation is the greatest generation that ever lived. They're smarter, they're younger, they're better educated,